This episode of the Blockshots podcast is sponsored by MapleBlock Capital. MapleBlock Capital is a leading digital assets investment firm based out of Middle East and Asia. The firm has an impressive portfolio of over 100 blockchain projects. MapleBlock Capital is a thesis-driven venture capital firm that focuses on all sectors of crypto and has a special interest in DeFi and infrastructure projects. You're listening to Blockshots, the latest media offering delivered to you by the CoinCodeCap team. So on our episode today, we have Andrej, the CEO of Tenderly. Tenderly is a company that supports Ethereum development and creates development tooling products for real-time monitoring, alerting, debugging, and simulating smart contracts. So welcome, Andrej, to the Blockshots podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, it's nice to be here. Doing great. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. So before we begin, I just want to congratulate. I was going on your website and saw that you guys recently raised a Series A. So congratulations on that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's thanks. I guess 2021 was pretty crazy for us. We managed to do quite a good number of things all around, fundraising included, and I guess that allowed us to sort of step on the gas and make sure that we are giving even more value to the developers as we're building things.
Right, and that makes me wonder how long you have actually been doing this. So can you talk a little bit about how long the company is and how long you've been into crypto and this particular side of it?
Yeah, of course. So we have been building Tenderly now, I guess, more than 3 years and running. So we initially started with blockchain in general. So for some context, there's 4 co-founders with Tenderly, and we all have a very engineering background. So that probably explains some of the reasoning in which direction we chose to embark in the blockchain space. So we basically got introduced to blockchain 2018, 2017, as we were participating in these hackathons, which I guess are a pretty popular concept in blockchain space as well. Very, very fortunate that that's the case. We entered the space from that engineering perspective, and we saw that the tooling and the technology being so young isn't really there yet, and that you really do have quite a bit of obstacles to go through when you start working with blockchain. That it doesn't necessarily help you embrace the new, and it requires you to sort of have a whole good chunk of frustration as the essential part of your daily work with blockchain, which we thought shouldn't be the case, and that's why we went into this direction to build tooling and services that makes the development of blockchain products and Ethereum primarily much more friendly and much less frustrating than it should be.
Right. That's super interesting. So, before we get to talk a little bit about Tenderly and what you guys have been doing there for a while, can you explain for the benefit of the audience and everything, as to what exactly is the developer tooling industry supposed to do? Like, I understand, from a general point of view, that it's supposed to help developers do their workflow faster. But in context of blockchain in particular, who are the people that are actually that require these development tooling kits, and what are they using it for?
Yeah, well, dev tooling, as the name suggests, is useful to all developers, regardless of the industry in which they are working in. So, for example, a pretty nice example of what developer tooling should be is, for example, the let's say AWS ecosystem or some of the more established programming languages. They all have a really rich suite of tools and services around the actual core technology that allow developers to move much more quickly and to achieve more with less people. And I guess the last part is the most important for blockchain, to us at least. And that's because, if we want the space to succeed and if we want it to sort of develop faster and faster, we need to enable the individuals and the small teams to just work much more effectively with the technology and not have to waste time on a lot of sort of busy work and stuff that is not essential to building the actual product that they are working on. So that's what developer tooling means to us. And as a broader concept, it's basically anything that can serve developers and product builders to do their work to do their work with less friction and with much more power behind them, regardless of the team size, and especially enabling the smaller teams being more important.
Right. So, okay, that makes sense. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about how is it developing? How does it, how does it work developing a developer toolkit versus actually developing an app? So, what I'm trying to ask is that, this industry is so iterative, things change so fast, and whatever you're building in terms of application, those things, get faded out and new types of application become trendy, right? Does the same thing happen with tooling as well? Do you have to always like chase new technologies, new blockchain, or is it more stable in comparison?
That's a very good question, actually. And the difference between building tooling for blockchain and building blockchain products is night and day. So it's a pretty big gap between the two. So our day to day does not include, for example, writing Solidity. What we are interested in is mostly the lower level stuff on the network level, and really looking at the internals of how individual networks operate, and that's sort of the core thing that we have to watch out for and look at how quickly it's changing. And obviously, being a pretty dynamic space, that does happen quite a bit. So yeah, that's one of the challenges of the job, just making sure that our tooling is always following, let's say, the bleeding edge of the blockchains that we support. So that's definitely interesting interesting space to be in, because we are there at the sidelines of when all the network changes happen. So it gives us a quite an interesting perspective in terms of how specific network level changes affect the overall usage and adoption of the technology. So that's a pretty nice place to be. And then obviously, just being in tech, everything changes all the time. So you you cannot really sit on your hands for too long. You always have to be prepared for the next thing. And on top of that, what we're also trying to do is we're trying to push that next thing and maybe be the first to introduce it to the world. So it's in part looking at what the rest of the ecosystem does, and the other part is trying to be that change for the ecosystem on our own as well.
Right. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense actually. But I mean, compared to how technology, I mean, even though technology moves really, really fast, like Web3 to me, it sounds like it moves way faster. It's like years versus months in regular Web2, how fast things are changing here. Okay, so what do you think is, I mean, we're seeing like a massive wave of, users and developers all trying to get into blockchain right now. Everyone thinks that, it's the next big thing. There's like a gold rush going on. So what do you think is like a major hindrance for existing Web2 developers to move to Web3? Because from what I still see in the market is that good developers in blockchain are still fairly limited, very hard to come by. So what is it that, in your opinion, is stopping from this transition to happen?
Yeah, so for us, and that's sort of where we put the entire direction of the companies, it's the sort of barrier to entry for blockchain as a technology. That right now is too difficult and too tricky to overcome. So one good example that I try to pull up in these types of questions is, you can think of blockchain right now as sort of the early machine learning in the 50s of the last century. So machine learning as a space existed for a good bit of time, and it was always just as valuable as it is right now, and just as useful. But it's at that time you didn't really have that much access to good quality tooling and resources to get started quickly. So you needed sort of a doctorate degree just to get started with doing anything there. we feel that it's not on the same level of complexity as it was back in the day with ML, but blockchain is suffering from that problem. And what we can learn from the machine learning space is just one example of that. Is machine learning space really prospered with the advances of tools like TensorFlow and PyTorch and all of these frameworks that really made the technology much closer to the let's say average engineer, and it became possible to experiment with the technology over the weekend instead of requiring 3-4 months to get started with it and being productive with it. We see that something like that is missing in the blockchain space. It's, I guess, our opinion and sort of witnessing it firsthand. It really does require a lot of overhead to get started with blockchain quickly and really grasping all of the new concepts and grasping all of the different ways things are done using blockchain. So what we have been doing with Tenderly is making sure that we slowly create this roadmap for you to follow to really ramp up really quickly with the technology and make sure that you can witness the benefits of it firsthand. And then once you get that ball rolling, it's up to the individuals to really get hooked and really dig deeper and have a more seamless experience while doing that. So that to us is the number one obstacle to developer adoption, because the technology can be as cool as we want, but if it's not easy to use, it won't really get used. And one good example of that would be Haskell, for example, which even though it has a lot of obvious benefits from the academia, the reality is that it's a bit too cumbersome to use, and hence not that many people use it. So we must escape that trap by any means necessary.
Right. So you're basically saying that you're sort of working in the direction of simplifying some of those challenges which have existed in different technologies, right? Which brings me to, my next question, that what is the core value proposition of Tenderly? I mean, we understand that it's supposed to simplify and improve workflows and make them faster, but can you talk a little bit about what exactly is that the Tenderly product suite offers, and who are the kind of people that are using this product and what are they using it for?
Yeah, of course. So Tenderly is, first and foremost, an ecosystem of tools and services that help you, just do more in the blockchain space. So over the years, we started with, just simple development tools. So stuff that makes it easier for you to write smart contracts would be the easiest way to explain it. So just shedding some light into the process of, what happens when something goes wrong, and really making sure that you have all the information that you need to effectively work with it. But over time, we have sort of expanded more and more into what we are now today. And that's sort of on one end, the same developer tooling and services that are useful while you're writing smart contracts. But on the other hand, we also, we have built a pretty complex and comprehensive pipeline for data processing and data extraction on the blockchain. So now a lot of the information can be we offer to developers to really use as the foundation and as the platform to build their products on top of. So it's really our core value is just being there for the developer throughout the development process of their dApp. So while it's in the pure development phase, prototyping phase, pre-production testing, and even in production, once you deploy contracts and really need to get a grasp of what's happening with them, we are there for you, and we have a service or two that helps you make your life easier at each of those points. And then in terms of users, so the most general audience and probably people that use us sort of the most broadly would be basically anybody who is interested in learning about a particular transaction, a particular contract, analyzing something that happened on chain. That would be the broadest use case for Tenderly. But then where we really shine is when we are working with these really top companies in the space. So we have the fortune of working with really the best of the best in the Ethereum ecosystem, and with them sort of we we try to enable them in every way possible to make sure that their engineering organization has everything they need to succeed and to just iterate more quickly and bring new innovation to the space, as fast as possible.
Right, right. That makes sense. So, when you say that you guys offer a lot of services to help people iterate production, pre-production, all of that, do you also offer infrastructure services similar to, say, something like an Infura or like a BitQuery or something like that? Or is it purely software services for, testing and analyzing code and all of that?
Yeah, so it's I guess it's a step beyond that. So we don't offer direct sort of JSON RPC endpoints that Infura would offer, but how we try to think about giving value to the developers is really what would be the next step beyond just the JSON RPC? Because I mean, and this might go into a bit more technical domain, but even if you have just pure access to the Ethereum network. There really is a lot of work for you to do around it if you want to build a truly comprehensive and complex dApp. So the result is, even though you use some of these infrastructure services such as Infura, you're still left with a lot of, it's still overhead at the end of the day that you have to tackle, that you have to solve specific engineering problems that you otherwise don't really care about, but are necessary for you to set up the foundation for your dApp or protocol to work correctly. And that's really the place where we do offer these, I guess, quote unquote, infrastructure services. But we are thinking more about these as sort of abstractions over on-chain data and really giving you more direct access to it. So, for example, because we process all of the transactions on now, I guess, around 20 networks in the sort of Ethereum ecosystem, we are able to give you really granular, really direct, really precise signals from these networks when certain things happen with your smart contracts or when certain activity triggers your alerts. Or we have pretty good indexing services that allow you to really just fetch the information that you're interested in. And for the extreme cases, if you really want to analyze an individual transaction, we also give you a full debugger experience, whatever that means to everybody. But we really shine a light on the entire transaction up to the sort of single instruction level and allow developers to pull any type of information that they would care about from there. So in a sense, while we do not provide sort of the fundamental or basic infrastructure services, we do have a good chunk of APIs and webhooks that allow you to build, I guess, more complex projects in less time than if you were to reach for the pure JSON RPCs of the world.
Right, right. So essentially, you're not doing the network relaying and all of that, but you're still processing tons of information and basically fetching that in ways that can simplify the analytics, right?
Yeah.
If I got that right.
Yeah, of course.
Interesting. So, okay, I think we've talked a lot about the project and the challenges that developers face. But for someone who's just getting started in this space, looking to get on the development side of things, how do you recommend they get started? And I feel like this is like a very appropriate question to ask to someone like you, because you seem like you're young company, young person, probably haven't been doing this for decades. So how do you explain to someone who's just getting into college or something like that, looking to get into blockchain development or things like that, to get started? And does Tenderly sort of help that process, make it easier for new people to get onboarded into blockchain development?
Yeah, of course. So I guess I would say there's two primary ways of going about it, depending on how sort of do-it-yourself you are. So one would be, leveraging the fact that we are, participating here in a very open and a very transparent ecosystem, and that there are tons of projects that are that are completely built in the open. So that is a really good opportunity to to take and really look at the details of how these projects got started, how they built what they set out to build, and really learning by observing would be the one useful way how you can get really started with blockchain development. And there, we obviously can help you with our debugger and explorer, because for any project, smart contracts and pure source code is just one part of the equation. Another very useful thing to look at is the live transaction data that's happening on chain, and really that's super exciting for the blockchain space as well, because this is the first time that you can really peek under the curtains for other sort of successful projects in the space and be able to see exactly the same things that the developer on that project would see. So that would be one very easy way to sort of start exploring the space, and at your own pace get onboarded to really the very best practices of the industry. And then the other part would be just simply starting, having an idea to build something using the technology, and trying to build it yourself, over a weekend, ideally, if you can do it that quickly. But that there, the ideal setup that I would sort of say is, just look at whatever resource you can find online that would be interesting to you, and try to replicate that in your own environment. So start with something like Hardhat, get a basic project running, connect to a testnet to really see for yourself that you can actually deploy a smart contract and not just read about doing that. And then at that point, it's I guess tenderly would be still a bit too early for you to sort of fully leverage it. But once you deploy something, you can take a look at the transaction on Tenderly and see really that stuff is happening even though it's not running on your computer, which is for some people a pretty new experience.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess one challenge that I personally think happens, and I'm saying this based on speaking to a lot of people who are trying to do this, is that even though things are open source and everything is available online, the problem is that there is very little direction and too much information to process all at the same time, right? So maybe if you can talk a little bit about how to navigate all that complexity in a structured, streamlined fashion so that you can go through it like fast or something.
Yeah, so I'm afraid I don't have a correct answer to that, because one of the things that you mentioned, and that's with the industry changing so quickly, is that you cannot really consolidate or curate the online content to a degree that's at the pace that the industry is moving in. So
Right.
the unfortunate reality is that you will have all types of content all over the place, all targeting or all created at a different point in this still relatively young ecosystem. So that definitely is a bit of a challenge. But in terms of a roadmap or direction that you can take in, I guess my only advice there would be to just really be focused about what you want to learn about, and then go from there. So, for example, if the primary thing that you want to learn about is writing a smart contract, then there really is no point in digging into sort of consensus algorithms and really the internals of network operations. But then at the on the other hand, if you're really interested in looking at the low level of the networks and really how things work under the hood, then I assume you can probably skip a lot of the smart contract stuff and patterns and libraries and frameworks, and you can really just focus on looking at a couple of key code bases. So it really, I guess, my only advice would be to just look at have a goal in mind when you're exploring content
Right.
on blockchain, and really that alone will narrow your search quite a bit. And then
Mm.
looking at the the content should be obvious if it's good, or if it's just pure surface level, not exactly for somebody doing a deep dive. So yeah, a couple of rules of thumb is all that I can give, but yeah, I'm afraid the journey is still a very individual one.
Yeah, and a challenging one too.
Yeah.
But I guess what you're saying is largely correct, that if you're being very, very result oriented, you're likely gonna get there faster than if you're just exploring it generally, right?
Yeah. Because there really is a lot of new directions in which you can take, and you need to pick the ones that you would like to tackle first. You can get to all of them,
correct.
but initially just one.
Yeah, makes sense. So, the next thing that I wanted to ask you, and I've always wondered about this, and you seem like the right kind of company to tackle this problem, is that, right now the user experience side of applications that we have in Web3 seems very archaic. It seems very, there's too many steps, a lot of which I personally feel can probably be abstracted eventually. Like, for example, to this date, when you do make a transaction on any network, you first have to approve that token on the smart contract. You then can, actually use it. You also have to maybe think about getting and revoking those permissions. You have to sometimes add tokens to your wallet. A lot of stuff that is probably very intuitive if it was in Web 2. So, what do you think is the role of a company like Tenderly working in dev tooling that can, accelerate the user experience on the final apps that we see in the market? And how do you see that evolving?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question to point out, and that's something that we are actually tackling already with the companies that we work at. So one benefit that we have is, and the tech that we have is that we can. Obviously, the user experience is extremely important. I mean, just as developer experience is important for developer adoption, user experience is important for individuals grasping the technology correctly. And I agree that right now there are too many steps to take to just onboard onto Web3 seamlessly, or just even look at and see what the deal is with it, not even participating initially. So actually, we already have, with a couple of companies, sort of rolled out features and improvements that tackle this user experience problem. And I guess the first one that we did was with the Instant app and their simulation mode. So for example, one thing that is needlessly complex is dealing with money for the first time that you run into the space. You don't really want to have that fear of losing funds constantly over you as you are trying new things out. So one piece of technology that we have and that's the transaction simulations that we have on our platform, that give you the ability to preview transactions as if they were actually sent to the network, but really require no funds, require no authentication, and none of the complex steps that you would normally have to take. So using that technology and embedding that directly into the UIs of individual apps, and that's what we have done with Instant App. So for them now, you don't need to go through the regular and painstaking process of just buying crypto on an exchange, opening up an account, passing KYC, transferring some funds. What's a MetaMask? What's a private key? At which point do I get scammed for my money? That type of thing. And you can just enter the simulation there, and really just have like 100 ETH at your disposal, and just click around and get the feeling for exactly what the DApp is and exactly what the ecosystem has to offer. And that will give you, hopefully enough confidence into the team, into the project, that you can then, at your own pace, slowly onboard, through that still difficult process of acquiring crypto and transferring it to an account, and then starting to play with it for real. But that's one big role that we see for us as well, is maybe not directly as tenderly helping the end user experience, but really pushing the organizations that we work with to really think about that and helping them do that with some of the platform services that we touched on earlier on the call.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the product is in control of those organizations, right? So, I mean, UX is in their control, not yours. But what you mentioned is actually really interesting because now that I think about it, I've used that InstaDApp simulation environment, and it's actually much, much better than trying out a test net for some other app. Because even when you're using a test net, the process can be like very painstaking. You have to go source some ETH from a faucet, and then there might be like waiting or something like that. And then it's just not the same as having a simulation environment running your transactions. So yeah, that's super cool. Okay. Yeah, and that's great, and lovely that you guys were a part of it. So one more question that I had was, and this is probably not, directly related to what you guys are doing, but like just the general theme of how I'm seeing this development tooling and infrastructure space evolving. So, I mean, Infura, right? Of course.
Yep.
So Infura as a company routes, I don't know, I think as much as like 70 to 80% of all transactions on Ethereum. It's some crazy number, right?
Yep.
So my question is, in Web3, everyone talks about decentralization, open source, all of that, no central point of failures. But like the fact that pretty much all transactions on Ethereum have to go through Infura, which is like a centralized service, isn't it like very similar to just like good old AWS? And how do you think about the space and the end game for this? Because I feel like even you guys as a company, let's say you become the standard for development tools, you're a centralized company that controls those tools, right? I mean, and those services, right? So it becomes a centralized point of failure again, right? So how do you plan to sort of integrate those decentralization ethos, and what do you think about this entire issue?
So it's a couple of questions there. So first of all, on the Infura topic, so that's a bit interesting that it's perceived that way. But one big benefit of let's say Ethereum as a network and it being fully decentralized is that the routing of transactions through Infura is not actually a requirement for those transactions to be sent. So, for example, if you took out Infura out of the equation today, nothing would actually stop. You would just find another node to submit a transaction, and you could go about your day without any problems. So I think it's more of a misunderstanding of how things work under the hood. That causes that perception that Infura is the centralization point of Ethereum, which I don't think it is. And then on the topic of
no. So I want to interject here because I want to understand this a little bit. So if the services that Infura provides go down, wouldn't that result in a lot of people experiencing outages? Because I've seen that a lot of times, RPC requests time out if those particular nodes that it routes through are off, and then people have to like find a new node or something, right? So I mean, even though it's not like a barrier, but it is something that has like effect in, if it goes out, it'll affect a lot of people, right?
Yeah, but it's a user experience issue. It's not a fundamental flaw of the platform, right? So you can still send it in some other. I mean, that also I believe will be fixed with time, because the only thing that you would have to do at that point is just have a couple of backups on hand in case the main one falls down. So it's I would say it's just it's an inconvenience, and it's a bit maybe frustrating that those outages, I suppose, happen at peak load. I would assume when things start to get really interesting and you really don't want your JSON RPC provider to fail. But other than that, that's I don't know if I explained it correctly.
No, I think it makes sense. You're basically saying that you can easily sidestep Infura if you want to. It's just that people generally don't because a matter of convenience.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And then the other point of decentralization and eliminating these centralizing forces, let's say, from the ecosystem. So to us and in general, how we feel about it is, I think it's a two-step process. So decentralization is the ultimate end goal, and we definitely want to get closer and closer to it. With every year, I suppose, because it's a slow one. But at the same time, you do need to have sort of the speed and the flexibility for people to build more quickly. And tenderly, as a sort of a developer companion, I feel we're in a pretty good spot to have that control of, because obviously centralization versus decentralization. At one end you have speed, at the other you have transparency. And then for us, it was a trade-off of, do we want to provide as most value as we can to these developers, then for them to build these, industry-leading decentralized products? Or is it more important for us just to be called decentralized because, that's what everybody in the space is doing? And for us, it was more about the developers and more about helping them. Because at the end of the day, as long as we have an established trust with them, it really isn't an issue on that. Now we're going to do a 180 and just become some evil in the space. But the other interesting thing is, even if that happens, we are still just supporting infrastructure. We are still just helping you make your dApp better, but are not fundamentally driving the decisions for you. So it will still be for some time a game of figuring out which direction to take on an individual dApp level, and seeing what you're comfortable with. I mean, obviously, to your point, most of the ecosystem is comfortable with having Infura as the go-to destination for the transactions. But it's just the feeling that if Infura decides to be bad now, there's a really easy migration path away from them. So I guess that's what keeps people honest, and that's what we feel is most important in the end.
Correct. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, again, that was super interesting. So thanks, Andre. Like, I think that was a really interesting conversation. Learned a lot. Definitely a really interesting space that you're into. Do you have any final thoughts? I think that's all the questions from my side. We can probably close this after.
Yeah, I guess the only last words are just for to encourage more people to try building something in the space and to try play with something that is a super new and interesting thing that we have sitting around right now.
And we all know there's like real good incentives for doing that.
Yeah.
So just in case that helps. So yeah, thanks again. Thank you for coming to the podcast. It was super nice chatting with you today.
Yep, pleasure chatting as well.